On that note, let's kick off today's session. As always, what is Code to Career? The aim of Code to Career is to create a community for software developers, especially those with little to no working experience. It's a place for them to get information on what to expect in the working world. I've worked with many juniors and interns over the years, and this is my way of trying to help them bridge that gap when entering the professional space. A few disclaimers. I am not claiming to be any kind of expert. I will share what I have learned, what I have seen, what I know new employees struggle with. But not everything works for everyone. You have to pick and choose what makes sense for you, what fits with your style and your attitude. We will talk about things that can seem very abstract. This is what happens when you have little or no experience. You have no way of understanding unless you've been in those situations, been in those environments. However, remembering what we talk about will shine a light on these situations when we encounter them. There are a wide range of companies, cultures, and environments out there. So there is a decent chance that we talk about things that you will never encounter in your career. Nonetheless, forewarned is forearmed. There are exceptions to probably every single thing I will say. Situations are rarely simple, and it is only our lack of understanding that makes situations seem simple. Finally, I am South African, and my experiences and knowledge is based around the South African market and South African companies. Since these videos are available for anyone in the world to watch, please keep that localization in mind. Alright, so today's session was titled Morale, Mood, and Beggars. So we'll start off with morale. And morale and mood are two very closely linked concepts. When we're interviewing, when we're considering companies to apply to, a suggestion I often make is, if they are happy to take you on board, try to spend the day with the team, especially the team that you will be a part of. And one of the most valuable pieces of information you will get out of this is to try to become aware of the mood of a team. This includes both how it makes us feel when you're in a particular team and the mood of those around us. It's important to be aware that the rest of the team can be in a good mood. They can have high morale, and yet at the same time, it doesn't make us feel good. And that is something to be aware of. Both of these, our moods and the moods of a team, exist at 3 levels: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. An example of short-term: something that has put me in a bad mood today. Perhaps I had a flat tire on the way to work and had to fix it on the side of the highway. Medium-term: for example, my long-term girlfriend has broken up with me, and because of that, I may be sensitive for a few weeks. Long-term: this is when we start to be defined as behaving in a particular way, one that is negative to the team, but something that everyone has to live with. And this is particularly bad. If we recall the first incident, why is the flat tire so problematic? For many of us, we can deal with it. But the problem it creates is that we lose the sense of comfort we get from a predictable day. We expect to get to work on a particular time. Even if the workday itself is very unpredictable, we have some idea of the range of things we have to deal with on that day. But then we have to leave late because we came late. So our getting home time is now late. And all of this makes the day uncomfortable. But again, why? The reason is because we are all creatures of habit. For most of us, when we unexpectedly get forced out of our habits, it is incredibly uncomfortable. In the general sense, for many people, the biggest fights they have with other people are started due to them having some expectation built up in their minds and reality giving it a cold, hard slap. And the more emotionally invested that expectation is, the larger the reaction is. As an example, if you've booked a holiday and you've been worked to the bone and you're looking forward to this holiday for months, and 2 days before you have to leave, your manager says your leave is denied because they're taking something live and you need to be there to support it. In that situation, there's a very real chance you'll just walk out, or you'll just ignore the manager and go and leave anyway, or some other unprofessional emotional response. It's really bad for the company to do that to you, and these things happen. However, the awareness that these things can happen, the keeping your ear on the ground so that you can be aware, oh wait, this project is getting close. What if it starts to go live around the time of the holiday? A little bit of keeping an eye on what's going on and trying to foresee these kinds of occurrences can really go a long way. But a lot of that starts with being able to identify this emotional buildup of something in our minds. So in the general sense, but also in the many different ways it applies to our working days, our working weeks, and our time at work, it's really helpful to be aware of how these things happen. Not just for ourselves, but for those around us. Oftentimes, team members chat with each other and you're aware that there's something that someone is looking forward to. There's an event that's coming up. And so, if they come in, you will often find that what the problem is comes back to one of those issues that have gone off the rails. So back to that example, it's something that happened to me. I accepted a position. Up front, even in the interview, I said that I had a 3-week holiday booked with my family coming soon. They said, sure, fine, not a problem. We'll allow you to take the leave. And then it was denied. And there was nothing I could do except essentially swallow it and move on. But that day, I made myself a promise that I would not expose my personal life like that again. It hasn't always been a success, but it's a lot better, and I've managed to avoid a number of these situations from occurring again. The mood of the team, the morale of your environment, it's incredibly important. And companies often pay attention to this. So like I've said before, individuals in the team who get along well, that is hard to find. You can teach someone to write code, to understand code, to work with a framework, but you cannot teach someone to get along well in a team. That's just the way people are. So the morale of a team is something that many companies pay close attention to. And they often make efforts to improve things. Examples include Friday afternoon PlayStation games, after work meetups, often drinking, but generally just hanging out, team building exercises, leadership courses, company events. There are a lot of different ways, and there needs to be, since different ideas work for different cultures and for different people. So this is something to keep in mind when I've spoken before about the idea of company culture. This is one of those aspects. In your interviews or in your discussions with managers, ask about this. Get some idea of what companies do to try to improve the morale of a team or a department. If it's a very meh response or lukewarm, definitely that's a warning sign. So that's kind of some thoughts on morale, mood, and let's see what's happening with chat. Right. Music sometimes helps with that. If you need to switch up your mood or your emotional state, try changing what you're listening to while coding. 100%. And certainly in the short term, there are many things you can do. Many of us are aware of what's good, what we enjoy, and it's in many cases just a matter of identifying, okay, you know what, I missed my alarm clock. It made my morning stressful and rushed and panicky, but I managed to get to work on time. So you just need to pay attention and have that bit of awareness to say, yes, it was stressful. I'm at work, but I'm a bit more stressed than I normally am, or I'm a bit upset about something. So let's take some action. Music, if that's what does the job, do it. If you find doing the typing practice calming and mindless, try that. There are any number of things that work for us to kind of help center us. And if there isn't, as you go through your days, especially in your own time, pay attention. Keep an eye out on what helps. Try to think back to, you know what, there was this time I had this big issue with my boss, but it just so happens at the end of the day, I went to the gym. And you know what? It managed to, using that as a form of stress relief, managed to get past it. So pay attention to these and identify them and use them. Put them to action. Especially in the short term, our moods are as easily as it can be taken negative. With some action, it can also be pulled back to the positive. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. All right. So those were some thoughts on morale and mood, and it's a topic that's very difficult to talk about because companies really are all over the spectrum on either of those. So as a concept, you kind of got to be aware of it, but you only really know what you're dealing with when you're on the ground with a particular team in a particular environment. And the more aware you are, the more attention you give to these things, the more likely you are to slowly start to see what's going on, adapt and adjust, and you will be happier for it. So, beggars. You need to have drive as someone who is working in any career. So many times I hear the ask for a raise story, concern, complaint. And If you've been in more than one position, you almost definitely have one of these stories yourself. And my thoughts on this is as follows. We should strive to not be beggars. We need to build our skills, our confidence, our understanding of our situation in the current company. We need to have a goal. We need to strive to be better. Each day, we need to try to be better and do better than the previous one. And we need to show that confidently at the companies we work at. They need to be aware of the value we bring. We need to help them bring more value, both with our own ideas and with them sharing what they need, which they may not be aware that we can assist with. But by trying to open that communication, that form of communication, we can start to improve. Because if we do not, we will always be at the whim of the companies we work for. We must always remember that the aim of a company, any company, is to make money. And there are only two ways to do that. One is to increase the amount of money coming in. And two is to decrease the amount of money going out. For the majority of companies, the largest expense is salaries, what we are paid. There is always a battle to get as much from any employee as possible, while paying them as little as possible, but also without the risk of losing them. So there is some fairness and balance, but we will almost always be at the bottom end of that range. And the reason this is difficult is because as employees, we are often responsive. When we have a problem, when we're under financial stress or family stress or some other issue that we need to go back to the company and discuss, it's only in our minds at that time. But it's easy not to realize that as individuals in the company, managers, HR, this is what they do all day, every day. So we do not have that level of experience, of thought, of depth to be able to stand on an even footing with them and have a fair discussion. So that's something to keep in mind, and is often at the root of many of these I need a raise stories. And the reality is that is not something that you just go and you sit in your manager's office and say, I need a raise, and he says no, and that's it. And now it's, oh, I've been treated so unfairly. There are many things that go into having to convince a manager, convince him to go to HR or to the individuals above him to green light this. So this has led to an industry-wide culture of not getting a fair salary unless you can go out there and get an offer from another company. When you get that, then the company will give you a pay raise, probably to match the offer that you've received. However, this comes with a cost, because it's a problem for recruiters who must put in the effort only to be denied their payday. It's also a problem for the company you got an offer from. They will have stopped their efforts to find someone for that position when they made you that offer. They often can tell from an interview the likelihood of you accepting an offer if they give it. When you turn it down, then you turn from a valuable asset that they were looking forward to joining the team to a disruption, especially if the reason for you denying their offer is because you accepted a counter offer. It's a different story if you all can't come to some sort of an agreement. And as I've said before, it's often a small world. And managers talk to each other, developers talk to each other, and it is rarely a secret to say that you've accepted a counter offer. And in a way, you're a bit lucky if the other side does not find out about it. So there are a number of factors that affect the situation. Many are subtle and are a combination of things in your particular situation. But there are some big common ones that I've come across. 1. Make yourself so valuable to a company that they cannot afford to have you leave. This gives you bargaining power. However, not everyone has a willingness to use it. Sometimes they feel bad putting that pressure on the company. Not everyone has the emotional strength or the right attitude to really put the pressure on the company to try to get the most out of your position there. Sometimes we set a precedent. If we're only asking for a pay raise when we're in a squeeze, you're not going to have a lot of luck, since companies work on schedules and timetables. There's usually a once-a-year meeting to discuss increases, bonuses, etc. And this is at a high level. If you don't get yourself represented well in there via your manager or others at that level, you probably won't see anything special. Learn what your opportunities are in the company you're in. By talking to others, their experiences, where they are now, you can get some idea of how far companies are willing to go to take care of the developers. And set your expectation of what you're going to expect out of this company accordingly. Remember, earning well is a long game, not a 1 or 2 increases or position changes type of game. As time goes, there's a shorter and shorter list of companies that can pay you at that increased rate. And as you kind of reach that level, be creative with what you do and how you represent yourself. If you're a stock standard senior developer and represent yourself as such, then you will be paid accordingly. Find what brings value to companies and build that into your CV and your communications early. Finding work and working with CVs and recruiters is very much a copycat game. When it's time to find work, people would look at what people are putting in their CVs and try to copy that. You need to be the one that's putting value in your CV before companies even realize they want it. Whether it's at an industry level or at a skill level, you need to overwhelm them with value. And finally, it is really difficult, but try to avoid the counter-offer culture. It's a small world. Companies have long memories, and unfortunately, counter-offers rarely sit well in the long run. And you may find yourself being denied an opportunity. Your CV may not even make it past HR and to the manager's desk, simply because they're aware that you were there before and you accepted a counter offer, and if they try again, their expectation is the same thing is going to happen again. So the second time round, you may legitimately want a position there, but unfortunately, the door is closed. So there was one time in my career where I did actually accept a counter offer. I know individuals who will quite happily accept a counter offer because they're comfortable where they are, and they really have no intention or don't think in any way of what they're going to be doing beyond where they are now. So for them, it's just a case of get an offer, accept the counter offer, and life goes on as usual. In my case, I went to the managers and I explained that I should be getting more than what I am currently earning. And they agreed, but as is often in these scenarios, there's any number of reasons that they cannot give that to you. And so they said, no, sorry. However, if you do have an offer, they will consider it. An offer from another company, that is. So I went out there, I did the interviews, I got an offer, I brought it to them. And they said, okay, well, you are a valuable member, so we'll be willing to match that offer. At which point I said, no. Why should I accept your match? I've got this offer in this great other company with newer technologies and more opportunities for growth and a larger team that I'll be working with. Why should I stay here for that same amount of money? So if y'all are wanting me to stay, I think y'all should add the difference back on top. My current salary versus the offer, that difference, please add it on top. And it looked like my manager was about to fall out of his seat at this idea, at this concept. And the fact that I was not just willing to say thank you so much for the counter offer. So eventually he says, okay, let us think and discuss and we'll get back to you. A day later, I'm called into the IT director's office. And that 45-minute session in his office was the closest to an interrogation I have been in my life. It was crazy. And there were things said such as, why do you need to be paid so much? I don't even spend that much and I'm a director. What are you going to do with all of that money? You're paid more than any of the other seniors in the team. Do you think that's fair? And it was an incredibly uncomfortable place to be. And this is the difference between someone who doesn't really think about their worth and is reactive in their needs versus someone who has been doing this and been thinking about these things day in, day out, every day for years. In this director's case, decades. It was an incredibly crazy meeting, the likes of which I've never encountered before. By the end of it, I stuck with my guns, and lo and behold, they did. They gave me the counter offer at the rate that I wanted. However, during this time, I'd been getting a lot of advice from a lot of different people, some of which I've shared here regarding the kind of negativity you can build around you by accepting a counter offer and the way companies begin to view you, especially if you make a habit of it. But also, the reality is, once you're looking to leave, you're looking to leave. And as much as companies so often say it's not all about the money, they're right. It's not all about the money. And if you're looking to leave, if you're unhappy, even if you accept that counter offer, there's a good chance within 6 months to a year, 2 years at the most, you're probably going to be leaving anyway. So take from that what you can. That's kind of my one and only time I accepted the counter offer, and I am very happy not to go back there again because it was crazy. So yeah, let's see what we got happening in chat. There's a danger to making yourself so valuable that they can't lose you. You can stop them from promoting you. That is 100% correct. But it's a difficult one because the question kind of becomes, especially as developers, if you move sideways into one of the streams alongside development, it becomes a more interesting discussion. But in development, the time now is such that you can basically go to retirement as a software developer. Companies are looking for that deep experience, and they will be happy to take you on even decades in, and compensate you correctly. But the question kind of becomes, do I want to move beyond dev? And that's where I've seen a number of these scenarios that can be a bit messy. If you're really good and a really critical resource to the team as a developer, if they're looking for a team lead, if they're perhaps looking for a manager, there is a very real risk that you will be overlooked. The real question becomes, do you want to go into that position? And that's a tricky one because not everyone is cut out for it, and a number of team leads are better suited to being developers than they are being leaders. It's, in many cases, individuals feel it's a natural progression, but it isn't. A much more natural progression for a developer is to go into a technical lead type of position, a systems architect type of position, and have a technical leadership sense where you're not necessarily leading people. So, in terms of promotion, that can be that's definitely something you got to keep in mind. But it's a much more interesting discussion than simply being overlooked for promotion. If you're an intermediate dev and you're kind of in charge of some of the older systems that the seniors don't want to touch, and they're aware that, if they promote you to senior dev, which is the natural progression, you're going to want to come off those older systems and to more newer and interesting systems because it's more interesting to work with, and because it's better for your career probably, then that's something that you got to be careful of, that there's a risk. As they say, and you'll get overlooked for promotion, or your promotion will be delayed as much as possible simply because you're really good at what you do. So there's just that line to be aware of between being overlooked for a natural promotion and being overlooked for a promotion that's not necessarily a clear line up from where you currently are. But yes, show your worth, but don't hoard your knowledge. And companies are very, very aware of this now. The idea of, as they call it, knowledge silos, where if a particular individual has to just disappear, never to return, if there is something that he is working with that nobody knows how to deal with, that is a massive risk to the company. And it comes out of this general growth of IT and the risks, awareness of risks, and the managing of those risks that come from other systems that have come into the IT space, which then have come down from the highest levels down to the managers as a form of training and to help them identify these risks. And one of those that very clearly get identified is the idea of knowledge silos, things that a particular individual knows that no one else knows. And they often spend time to kind of say, right, you need to start doing a once a week 1 hour training session so that other people can start catching up. You need to start sharing the work with that other individual and try to spread that knowledge so that if something has to happen to one individual, the team is not put back in a big way because no one else knows how something works. All right, let's have a look at some of the other comments here. I find when I get emotional, my code quality suffers. Yeah, that's I think that's pretty standard. It's good that you have that awareness, because for many of us, we have the put our heads down and forge ahead attitude, and we don't realize how much we're being dragged down by our mental state, our emotional state. And there's many things that can do it. If it's your emotional state, if you have something going on in your life that's really making you upset, that's really pulling you down, it can be your mental state. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you really worried about something? Any number of things can affect your mental state as well, and that both of those directly lead into your ability to concentrate. And concentration is a two-factor system. It's not, many people think, okay, how long can I concentrate for? Perhaps I can sit and work for 15 minutes at a stretch, half an hour, 2 hours, perhaps. And there's all sorts of advice about how long you should work for, how you should manage your breaks, how you should split up your time, what you should do in between those sessions of work, those sessions of concentration. But it's not just about time. It's about quality as well. And the two go hand in hand. There was an article that kind of really made the circles in a big way. And the point of the article was that even if you can concentrate for 3 hours at a stretch, and many of us feel that we can do it, the reality is after about, I think it was 40 or 50 minutes thereabouts, you don't have enough mental strength to stop your mind from wandering. And now it becomes a battle because you're working and your first 40 minutes, it's a breeze. You don't have to do anything to, so to speak, walk along the line. But as that time goes, your concentration levels start to drop. You start wandering off the line, and now you've got to split your concentration in two places. One is what you're actually working on, and two is to actually keep yourself on the line. And as the time continues to go, you're spending more and more of your time keeping yourself focused. And yes, your code is going forward. It may be slower, but it's not just about the speed and the amount of time that you're doing. It's that your quality is dropping because your concentration is getting split now 2 ways. And each time you're hopping from one to the next, you're mentally shifting gears. And this happens without you even being aware of it. So it's not a case of you're sitting there and you're typing and suddenly you look up and you've been staring at your screen for 10 minutes, haven't written a line of code. That's a movie extreme version of what some of us may think is how this plays out. It's happening all without even you being aware of it, because these systems of concentration are almost unconscious. It's not something that we're consciously paying attention to. So, all of these things have an effect. So it's a very good habit to become aware of these, and it's good to build habits that are conducive to this, to improve your code quality and your concentration, not just your concentration length, but your concentration quality as well. For many of us, you'd have to really push that to the extreme before you become aware of the fact that your concentration quality has gone completely to trash. So as you pay attention to it, as you continue to work, be aware of it. And it's that awareness that goes a long way, because your subconscious doesn't really interfere with the conscious unless it sees some reason to. And having that awareness for your consciousness is kind of it putting a finger out there. And if the subconscious happens to see that finger, it's going to reach across and you'll become aware of it. But if the one side of that link does not exist, it's going to remain in the subconscious and you're not going to become aware of it until such a point that your subconscious is practically screaming at you, and that you can actually see the effects of what's happening consciously. Like I said, when you're sitting there and staring at your screen for 10 minutes without having written a line of code, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, then you know, okay, the game is up, and anything I'm going to write now is probably going to be complete trash. All right. Right. Music helps. Yep, for sure. It's weird. It all depends on the day. Some days I can listen to loud music while I'm working. Other days that there must be silence. 100%. And it's because the reality is we're not the same person on any given day. And what works well with us and what does not work well changes. I mean, just myself, the music I listen to on a day-by-day basis sometimes, but often on a weekly basis changes. On any day, I could be listening to classic or some K-pop, some trance, some metal. It depends. It's a mood thing, and I'm aware of this, and I'm happy with it. I'll kind of just scroll through a bit of YouTube and see, okay, what's good in the music arena? Okay, that's looking interesting. Let's pop it on and see. 10 minutes later, nope, that's not working for me. Let's switch it out to something else. And it's just something that's very comfortable, very natural, and you learn to go with it. Not everyone listens to one style of music, and it's not even music on every single day that does the job. On a particular day, you may find that you don't want music, you want silence. Or you don't want music, you want something else. Your day may be a bit more comfortable just giving your mom a call and having a chat, because that's what you're emotionally feeling for. And that's what's kind of making you unsettled. So it's any number of things. In a very real way, many of us are different people at the surface level. We're different people on any given day, and the more aware of it that we are, the better we can work with it and kind of calm down any bumps so that we can settle into our comfortable day. I have days where I just do not want to code. I generally battle getting through days like that. Music does help, but I can reinvigorate myself by finding a cool 2-hour project to reset my mind space. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And so this is another topic I'm not sure I've touched on, but it's something that I've told a number of individuals, and that's the idea of it's not just working, it's about what you work on and the effect that work has on what you're doing. And it's concentration is very contextual. What I mean by that is you can love working with a particular language, let's say C#, but you may hate working on the current project that you're on. And in many cases, you can kind of get around that wall by working on something else. Work on a different project. Watch a coding video about some other topic or about something you want to learn. There's any number of different ways, and you need to explore and see what works for you. But as a developer, guaranteed you are going to come across days that you just do not want to code, and you could have a massive deadline at the end of that day, and you could be miles behind, and it could be lunchtime and you have not written a single damn line of code. It gets to that level. Be it stress, be it frustration, be it the beginning of a massive task that you just cannot get yourself to say, okay, I need to start on this. There's any number of reasons that we struggle to start to code. And based on a particular scenario, there are many different ways of dealing with it. For stress, I've mentioned it before. Take your time to breathe. Your own time. If things are getting too heated, too hectic, if people are freaking out, don't be afraid to take a 5-minute walk outside. Get some fresh air, take a few deep breaths, calm yourself. It's the same thing that we would do in interviews. The idea of always ask for a glass of water, because if you don't, when you're asking a question that you don't quite immediately know the answer to, you have to start answering. But if you have a glass of water there, you can take a sip and say, right, okay, take 10 seconds, think about an answer, kind of map it out in your head, and off you go. It's the same idea. When you're stressed at work, take a break. And I mean, as in immediate in your face stress. Take that break to try to reset. And then that will really help. Whether it's motivation. If it's motivation, if you're not motivated by what you work with, and that happens, we don't often get a choice in what projects we have to work on. And there are many projects that over time really become a nightmare to work with. Very few companies and leaders kind of have it down well enough, because or to the extent to say this project is 8 years old and it is in fantastic shape. The reality is companies can't afford it. Having high quality code and high quality project does not work well with budgets. So it's a best case scenario, and the natural reality of most projects is that they end up over time in a poor state. So from that perspective, you're going to end up working on projects that are an absolute nightmare to work on, that you're scared that any line of code that you change is going to turn the entire thing upside down. So yes, in that case, if you can't motivate yourself to work on what you're working on, motivate yourself to work on something that you want to work on. Find some other project, find some coding interview, find whatever it is that helps you get excited, that helps take you back to the roots of why am I a developer? Why do I love doing this? What is it about this that I really enjoy? And go and start getting excited about that. Find some way to find that excitement again, because that will give you just enough strength, just enough juice to kind of get you back into it. And many of the times, it's just about crossing that line. Once you're on the other side, you're in it. You're in the code, you're reading the spec, you're thinking about how to break it down, you're going through the code to see where your changes are going to fit in. And all of that will start to, the habits of solving these problems will kick in automatically, and you'll start going through the actions, and before you know it, you're well on your way. So I can agree with that. I have had days like that, and generally watch something new being released, code or dev, to get me excited again. Once I'm excited, I can continue going on my normal workload. Also, I have some awesome team members who help. Brilliant. And it is incredibly important to have just one or two of those team members who are like that. They're individuals who are fantastic at keeping a team going, and they do it in some cases with almost no effort. And I wish every team had one or two of these individuals. But if you are in a team that has one of these individuals, or some of these, or a manager like that, or a team lead like that, it is hugely valuable and will really go a long way towards helping you have lots of good days. Alrighty. So I have a video much about excitement, and this is the kind of thing where I would see where I'd be like, I would love to do something like this. This looks so awesome. So let's see if I can pull it up. Yeah. So I saw that came through to my email today, and I was like, wow, that looks fantastic. So this is the kind of thing that I absolutely love. It's I've mentioned coding game before, but it's done in such a way that it is interesting, and it opens you to so much that you may not necessarily be exposed to, yet it is so easy to get into. I've done a number of these in the past, and if you've learned a programming language, you can basically go and start. They're incredibly easy to get into. They're very structured in a sense of they cater well for those who have almost no understanding of what's going on, as well as those on the other end who have done many of these, who have scored very well, who are in there with a team of 10 working 16, 18 hours a day trying to get the most amazing bots. And yeah, so if you get an opportunity, if you have the time, even if it's just on a Saturday afternoon, sit down, give it a bash, spend a few hours and see what it's about. And it's fun because you get to see your code in action in a way that's much more entertaining and visually appealing than you'll normally otherwise encounter. Yes, it is this Thursday, so it is a very short amount of time before that kicks off, but it's one of the good ones because firstly it's a 10-day challenge, I believe, so you can really get stuck into it. And it's, if you only start on Monday because you have a very busy weekend, that's fine. You can start on the last day if you want and kind of just go at it and be a part of the experience. And again, if you're still studying, share the video with those in your class or with your lecturer and put together a group. And no, I think Thursday will not be, as the comment is, this Thursday and you're streaming on Thursday. Am I seeing a connection? It is not a connection that I have seen. However, having said that, it's an interesting idea and it's one I will have to think about. I do have a speaker coming through on Thursday, so that's the only tricky part about this. But I have no doubt if you come through to Twitch on Thursday or once this starts, you will find many developers who will be live coding their bots. Because like I said, it's entertaining, it's interesting, and it's what people enjoy. If you sit there and you write, you do a coding stream where you're doing nothing but writing code and no one can really see what's kind of going on otherwise for hours on end, it's really not that entertaining unless you're directly interested in what that person is working on. But when you have this kind of visuals, it's much easier for people to come and watch and be interested and see how the bot is doing and get behind a particular developer and try to see how well he does. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that are very interesting. And thanks for the idea, Keenan. It's certainly something I'll consider going in Thursday and over the next few days after that. All right, so that's largely the stream for today. Are there any other questions? Let's just have a quick look at right, nothing in Discord. And yeah, so I've gone through chat as well. But yes, as I was saying, if you're in whichever company you're working at, even as much as basically everyone is remote working at the moment, if you're studying, even if you're at school, this is something that you can get into, get together as a bunch. And if you follow them, if you sign up for the event, what will almost definitely happen is the organizers of the event themselves will have live streams as well, usually a few hours after the event starts, to kind of help get those who have no idea of what's going on, kind of get them going, answer their questions, give them some guidance, point them in the right direction. It's really an event that caters across the spectrum of skill and experience. And like I said previously, when you're not in a team, when you're not in a company, when you've these kinds of events give you something that you can actually put on your CV to show that you've participated, that you've taken part in something, and that you have something to show beyond what has been given to you at your institute, at your university, at your technicon. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, and definitely should put you in the right direction to go and have a look at these kinds of events. All right, I think so. Given that we don't have a guest today, something I was considering doing is that in chatting with the potential guests, I've asked them, I've sent them a list of questions that I've created. And if y'all are so interested, I can consider myself the guest and kind of go through those today, and so that you'll have some idea of what the guests will be chatting about and be going through. All right, so I've kind of broken it up into 8 questions. And I will try to not go on for too long. All right, number 1, who are you and what do you do now? So, I'm Matish, and I'm a senior developer, although I've been a team lead as well. A good idea for another session. And currently, I'm working as a senior developer, working with the React framework, and which is largely on the website and essentially pixel pushing, building UIs, building screens. But I am not just a permanent employee. I work as a contractor, and as such, there's a different standard as a contractor versus when you're just a permanent employee. And that standard is kind of defined by what one of the clients said, which is, we need you to be at the level where our seniors can come and ask you questions on how to solve things. So in some ways, the expectation is to be a senior dev, and not leadership, but just someone whom others can kind of look up to help improve what they do, to help solve their problems, to help get them through the difficulties that they face. It's not like this with all clients, but a number of clients have this on their minds, and as such, as a contractor, you will somewhat get paid a premium versus your standard senior dev fellow developers. So that's kind of what I do now. In my case, I really bring a lot of user experience to the table, not knowledge in that respect. So many times I will offer alternatives, I will offer ideas on how to lay out UIs, how the workflows will feel like for the users, what they enjoy and don't enjoy doing, kind of dig out what's of value to the client. Do they have users who want to be incredibly quick? Do they want users who want things to look good? And any number of other questions that many of them don't think of upfront. But I use my experience to dig those out earlier and bring their awareness to these topics. So that's what I feel I bring to the picture, in addition to my technical knowledge. How did your career start? And how did you end up doing what you do now? All right, so I started with a what's called an MICT CETA internship. So these are internships that are offered by the government in South Africa, where they approach employers and they try to get them to take on developers straight out of Technicon, straight out of varsity, and essentially they pay the developers a fixed amount for that year that the company doesn't have to pay for, and it gives them the opportunity to upskill those individuals into the particular specializations that they require in their company. In a lot of cases, they will have to pay those individuals, and so for many companies the idea is that we rather take on intermediates or seniors rather than juniors, and let juniors get trained somewhere else where another company is willing to pay that sunk cost, as many of them consider it. So that's kind of how I started, via this internship in a company that did no dev. Basically, they had no developers. The closest they had to developers was a BI team. But because I was taken by the IT team, which is their help desk, their server management, their operating systems, and of that nature, I was kind of left to my own devices. And this was in some ways good and in some ways bad. It was good because I got to explore all sorts of technical things that I would not have otherwise. I got to write code to interact with servers, to interact with SQL servers, to do backups and build custom reports with essentially no guidance and no oversight. I did this because I needed to show something, and it's what I felt like I wanted to do. But again, the downside is that there's no guidance. You don't know. You're going to put these things on your CV and everyone else is going to look at this and go, okay, we don't need that. That's kind of useless to us. And so there was that. Then there was also, because there was no exposure to really many other devs, I spent 4 years at this company, which in some ways, career-wise, was largely a loss. Yes, I learned to be independent and work and figure things out by myself, but in hindsight, I could have done that anyway. And eventually I realized that that's just something I have a knack for. And so it's something I would have picked up anyway. So in some senses, it was not a great start to my career, but it was a start. And that was a good thing, at least. And how did you end up doing what you do now? So I started with that, and because of that, a lot of my code was back-end. There was very little visual, there was very little user interface. And then I went there to a small, I think it was a 4-man IT department. There was a junior, myself as an intermediate, a senior, and a manager, and that was essentially it. And then I spent some time there. From there, I went to another company that was a much larger company. And all this time, it was largely back-end code. And then at that company, after a few years, I essentially became the team lead. And it was decision time. The decision time was, do I stay as a team lead, or do I stay as a developer? Because over time, as a team lead, especially as you become more specialized, you're probably going to end up doing less and less code and more leadership. So at that point, I got an offer, and that offer kind of made the decision for me to stay on the technical side. So I joined that company, and I would say that was the most defining move of my career. And the reason being was that it really opened my eyes to just how non-existent the safety of being a permanent employee is, And the idea that if a company wants to get rid of you, they will get rid of you, and it's as simple as that. As well as the individuals that I worked with were brilliant. They were some of the smartest characters, and it really opened my eyes to just how far you can go in terms of what you learn and what you can do. And it comes down to the idea of no one really starts off being a brilliant developer. Everyone has to work their way there. You may start off 10 meters ahead of the guy in front of you, and when you're at the starting line, the 10 meters may be massive. But when you're running a 45k half marathon, that 10 meters don't mean squat. So it's that mindset to keep that a little bit every day is going to serve you much better than the marks that you achieved at varsity, or the really good position that you got out of varsity versus those who didn't, or any number of these perceived short-term gaps early in our career, which in the long term end up making very little difference. And so that also, in that position, I started on web UI work. And up to that point, I was of the mindset that, web, that's not for me. It's finicky and it behaves weird. However, it was at that point that I really started getting introduced to the Angular framework. And as I've mentioned before, the idea of frameworks, it was really at that point that they had started to turn, and web was moving away from the Wild West to much more of a framework mechanism, which was much easier for back-end developers to get into. And then from there, I essentially went into contracting. I joined a company who takes on high-performing seniors and places them with clients and essentially manages that whole relationship for you. So you're not going out there on your own and making sure you've got clients to speak to. They got individuals who do that. They know the managers, they know the directors, they know who's looking for what. And in some ways, it's the opposite of recruitment. Because they essentially take a cut of what you earn, they're highly motivated to ensure that you're happy as can be and that the client is as happy as can be with you and your efforts and your performance. And that works great, because if you're not working, they're not making money. So that's what I've been doing for a number of years now, and I love it. At the beginning of 2019, or previous to 2019, I spent about 3 years working on Angular. And then since the beginning of 2019, I've been working on React, which is another web user interface framework. And surprisingly, I enjoy it. And part of the reason is because I enjoy looking at it as a whole solution, not just this page or these components, but how does it work across the board? What's your experience as someone seeing it for the first time? And all of these different, more subtle questions that often even managers, business analysts don't think about. So that's essentially how I got to where I am now. What's the favorite part about your job? Well, like I was, if you can't tell, it's the idea of working with these interesting, dynamic, complex web problems, user problems, and kind of coming up with ideas keeping all of these different parts of the problem in mind as you're kind of stepping through, bringing this value to the clients to say, these are things we need to think about upfront rather than trying to fit these things in after the system is built. And that's where the misery for anyone involved starts, is when you have to jerry-rig things into a system that's already built. That's really what I enjoy, what keeps me happy. And in some ways I'm in a minority, because there are many developers, even front-end UI developers, who hate that portion of the work of having to sit and build and think about these things, and buttons and drop downs and all sorts of components. It's, for many of them it's boring, but somehow for me it's not. Right. What did you do that led to success in your career? That's such an open-ended question, but for me, I think part of it is kind of trying to find a niche where I can really bring value to the clients that I work with. That's not quite common and part of the stock standard definition. I don't know if it's so much something I did, but part of it also is the realization that I can work well by myself. I spent probably the entire first half of my career working for a team with senior developers who I can learn from. And every single time I took a step, it was missing it. I would end up in a team that's like 2 people and one of them's a senior developer. And I've had to kind of learn to swim by myself. And at some point, the realization dawned on me to say, you know what? I can do this on my own. I've managed to do this on my own for so many years. And I need to kind of stop looking for people who are going to hold my hand, because I don't need it. And so that realization as well has led me down this process and led me down this path of how to think about my career, how to think about the work that I do, that I feel has had a lot to do with my success in my career. Do you have any advice for those starting their software career? The only thought I have on that is, I wonder how many hours of videos this has added up to now, which is essentially the crux of what I am trying to do with this channel, is to say, here is some things to think about as you enter the working world. So yes, lots of advice. Any ideas on how to be a better developer? Again, that's in a very real way what I am trying to do here. How to think about it, how to approach it, find what works for you, but spend time and find it. It's not just gonna fall on your lap. Did you always know you wanted to be a developer? Nope, absolutely not. When I was in grade 10, or leading up to grade 10, and in South Africa between grade 10 and grade 12, we kind of choose our subjects that are going to more than likely take us into university, or in that direction. And so strangely, I was not offered computers entering into computer science, as they call it, entering in that at the time, because they couldn't get a teacher. And so I kind of said, okay, you know what, no stress, I'll I'll go into accounting. I've got fantastic accounting marks. I can aim to be a chartered accountant, and problem solved. Problem was, I loved spending time on PCs, admittedly, playing games. And I would spend all of my breaks at school in the computer room, kind of seeing what's going on, being part of that environment and being part of the culture. And it's only when I got to matric that my dad came to me and said, listen, one of his friends has done this MCSE thing, and he didn't do computers, and now he started his career in that space. So do you want to do that? And I was like, sure, perfect. So I did my MCSE after matric, and for those who don't know, MCSE is largely based around networking and server maintenance, hardware maintenance, those areas, rather than software itself. It's largely taking care of the systems that the software will run on. So I did that, but unfortunately, everyone and their uncle was doing their MCSE at the same time as well. And the reality was, because there was no restriction to doing it, it's like a 6-week course in total, and you write your exams, which unfortunately the exams almost always had cheat packs. So basically everyone passed with fantastic marks. And but most of these people were off this idea that, you can do this, it's a few weeks, you pass with great marks, and you can find work and you can be paid well. And that worked when there were a few people doing this, but when there are tons and tons of people doing this, then that becomes problematic. And at that point, one of my friends from school was like, you know what, but why don't you do computer science at varsity? And I'm like, but how? I didn't do computers at school, so I'm not going to be able to get in. And he was like, dude, you're an idiot. They basically have a separate first semester set of groups, one who did computers and one who didn't do computers, and in one semester they catch you up, and that's it. After that, you're basically all on the same page for the rest of the degree. And so at that point, that's how I spent after matric, grade 12. I spent a year doing my MCSE. I spent a year kind of doing some odd job MCSE work, and then I started my degree. And from there, I never looked back, because mentally it was a fantastic fit. I love the problem-solving portions of it. I didn't do overly great at the theoretical portions of it, largely because I didn't understand why I was learning something. Why do I need to learn how a linked list works? For what? And then over time, as I got to see these things in action, much of it came naturally. And I would build a linked list before being 90% done and realizing, oh my gosh, this is the linked list stuff that they were talking about at varsity. Now it makes sense. So that was the difficulty for me when I was studying at varsity, is that I struggled with understanding the context of what I was learning and why am I learning that. Because even when I did databases at varsity, it's like, why? Why are we writing this weird SQL stuff? It doesn't make any sense. But obviously, as you work with databases, as you work with and understanding what's happening a little bit under the hood, it's hard to understand a database when you've never had any concept of a basic software system, a UI, an API, and a database. The concept of a database makes no sense when you have no understanding that, this data is kind of got to sit somewhere. When you go and type in your username and password on a site, what do you think happens? That stuff doesn't magically do a check with the gods and then say, okay, the IT gods have deemed your credentials to be correct. There's a logical way that happens. And in some cases, because of the way you'll have a database course, a C++ course, a Java course, yes, that teaches you about that, but it doesn't quite teach you, or not for me, perhaps for other people it was a lot more intuitive, but it didn't quite get through to me that, you know what, these exist in an ecosystem and they all need to work together and they all have different responsibilities. So once I started working with these systems, it made a lot more sense to me. And since I've started being a developer, I've loved being a developer. So there is that. But in the beginning, I had no clue what a developer was, let alone wanting or not wanting to be one. I just knew I loved working with computers, and from that perspective, I enjoyed it. Was there someone that had a big influence on your career, and what did they say or do? Yes and no. There were some individuals, but I formed the habit without even realizing until quite late in my career that I tend to not so much look at individuals, but at what people do and kind of bucket it into that's good, or I must remember not to do that. The first manager I worked with, he told me in the beginning, you need to communicate with your company what is going on. Are you happy? Are you not happy? At any point in time, if my door is open, come in, take a seat, let's chat. I'm always here. And not all managers or team leads express that well, but you as a developer, as an employee, you need to make that your responsibility to yourself to go and make sure that you always communicate what you're doing. And the reason is because time and time again, I've seen it through my career. Managers or your company doesn't know you're unhappy until you come there with your resignation letter. And so that piece of advice has served me well every single company I've been in, because they're always grateful. They can't always help, but they're always grateful to know where you stand, to know what's going on. And they can tell, okay, you know what, he wanted a raise. That's the second time he's asked, and we can't give it to him for whatever reason. More than likely, he's gonna be out of here soon. So let's start doing some succession planning now, because he's gonna be out of here soon. And that's helpful to them, and they respect that. So there was that I'll always remember. There was a developer that I worked with after I left the team lead and went into a position. And this guy was God level smart. He's moved on now and he works in somewhere in Europe. But yeah, this guy was proof of the pudding that if you spend 2 hours of the day outside of work, just learning, just skilling up, over time, you're going to be on another level altogether. You will essentially develop an understanding of code where you can read languages you've never seen before, simply because you can look at the syntax and understand what the creator was aiming to do by building this language this way. It was absolutely fascinating. Watching this guy look at code, think about work with code, is kind of like, I remember when I was young and I used to go for piano lessons, and I would spend 3 weeks trying to play a piece of music. And I would go to the lesson and the teacher would just open the piece of music, which he may have never seen before in his life, the piano teacher, and he would just play it flawlessly. with absolute ease. This is what it was like watching this guy working with code. He just had an intuition that was unmatched. And so for me, that was a massive influence because as a developer, and that's where my longer term career is going, and not into other areas such as leadership, management, project management, into any number of those areas, to kind of stay on the technical side. That's what I would strive for. And to see someone like that was a really big inspiration to say, you know what, you can be amazing as a developer, absolutely unbelievably amazing. So this guy had a very big influence from a technical perspective. Yeah, so those were like, two of the big standout influences because of what was said and what I experienced with those two individuals. But there's been a lot of kind of watching individuals and seeing what I felt was good, was not good, keep an eye on that, and kind of, in a way, when you think about things, they're not three-dimensional or four-dimensional, they're many-dimensional in our minds. And there are many different influences that are occurring. And, kind of keeping an eye on how individuals behave, what they do, and what you feel is good and not good, kind of creates some sort of boundaries on all of these different influences and all of these different thought processes that are kind of happening at the same time. And it helps you get your thoughts into a cohesive manner rather than just a string of ball that many of us consider some of these topics to be. So yeah, that was that. Yeah, 8 questions. It's like you're narrating my life. Yeah, so it's the way these things are, and it comes back to the reality, which is we're all walking our own journey, and anyone who comes here and tells you, you know what, this is the one way to be a developer, and this is this is it, and there's no other way, that's the first sign that they don't know what they're talking about. Because every developer that I've worked with, be it good developers or bad developers, have had to find their own way, find what works for them, what does not work for them, in all of the different facets, all of the many facets that make you a better developer. And that's one of the messages I've had in these sessions from the beginning, is that it's not one thing, it's not a few things, it's a large range of different things that make you a good developer, and many of them bring different strengths and weaknesses. And successful teams are about finding a good combination of strengths that work well together and that can overcome the weaknesses that come with them. So it's about personality, it's about what you as an individual bring to the team, and all of these help form a strong team, a strong cohesive team that hopefully each and every one of you all will find yourselves a part of one day. All right, final call. Any other questions, any other comments? Pop them in chat. Let's give it a minute. Yeah, there's no one right way. All right. For those of you who've just a quick question, who've watched my previous streams, I'm sure you've noticed that I'm using a different microphone today. So you're welcome to just jump into Discord and just let me know if you're happy with this microphone or if you prefer me to go back to the previous one. It's listening to yourself is one of those strange things where, I don't know, no matter how many times I do it, I wonder, is that really what I sound like? And then I'll use a different mic and I'll go, what? How do I sound so different? And yet, do I really sound like that? So yeah. So yeah. That's all right. Let's leave it at that. It's been a good stream. Again, please, excuse me, especially now as I am starting to go and starting to in a little bit run out of ideas. Let me know what y'all would like me to talk about. If there's something you would prefer me to go into deeper, something that's of concern to y'all that you want me to explore, to think about, I'm happy to do so. There's, in many ways, they're the questions that I can answer and answer reasonably well that people do, and there's some questions that I can touch on a bit, but if I've not had that experience, if I've not had that that exposure or come across that type of environment, it would take a bit of research on my side to kind of come back and give a more well-informed answer. So again, if there are questions that you would like me to come back to, please drop it in chat. And the usual videos uploaded to YouTube, so you're welcome to go and ask questions there. And we have the Discord channel. Please feel free to drop in and ask questions, anything you want to chat about, and I will answer as best I can. Links for both of those are just below the Twitch stream. If you just scroll down a bit, and yeah, that is a sign that my brain is now properly fried at the end of this long day. So on that note, thank you everyone. Be safe. And let's try to recall what the slogan is. Let's go from good code to a great career together. Thank you.